We are the biggest selling female group ever, and we are broke as broke can be.
Rags to riches and back to rags.
That means every time an album gets sold, TLC gets 56 cents.
I didn't make a dime on this tour.
Musicians don't make a lot of money in the music industry.
You ever look at a celebrity, platinum records, designer fits, luxury cars, and think, yeah, they're set for life?
Before 18, the money is already gone.
Yeah, not even close, because somehow every single one of them went broke. Not just one-hit wonders, I'm talking MC Hammer, Sean Kingston, Lindsay Lohan, Amanda Bynes, even Macaulay Culkin. Millions made, gone. And the craziest part, they all lost it for the exact same reason. Bad deals, fake lifestyles, people draining their money behind the scenes, and a system designed to make you look rich while you're secretly drowning.
So a lot of these influencers and people nowadays, they take their quick little money, they spend it all, they're not investing correctly, they don't have the right team, and they have a Lambo and then they're broke in 6 months.
From viral fame to financial collapse. LMAO, Cash Me Outside, Shia LaBeouf, nobody escaped it. So what's the one thing that took them all down? Stick around, because once you see it, you'll never look at celebrity wealth the same again. MC Hammer was born Stanley Kirk Burrell on March 30th, 1962 in Oakland, California. Now, growing up in an extremely religious family, Hammer, he would land a job as a bat boy for the local Oakland Athletics, which is the baseball team where he would entertain audiences during breaks with his dancing. Now, in fact, he was such a regular around the team that Reggie Jackson, he actually gave him the nickname Hammer for his resemblance to the all-time home run leader. We're talking about Hammer and Hank Aaron. Now, outside of his passion for baseball, Hammer, he also loves soul music. Now, after catching James Brown performing at the Apollo on television when he was only 3 years old, Hammer immediately began emulating his musical idol. That's actually one of my favorite things in show business, the whole James Brown, I'm working myself to death bit. It's we never made a video on James Brown. I really wish we did. Now, after cutting his teeth on funk and soul, Hammer, he gravitated towards hip-hop. Now, once he had finished spending 3 years in the Navy, Hammer would return to civilian life and he'd begin chasing his dreams of making music. Now, that's when he started performing at local clubs, and with the help of some of his former friends in the Oakland Athletics, he was able to finance the creation of his own record label called Bustin' Records. Now, Hammer recorded his very first studio album, Feel My Power, in 1987. Now, that project, it would make an impression on execs over at Capitol Records, who then signed him to a multi-album deal, the first of which is a reworked version of Feel My Power, now titled Let's Get It Started. Now, thanks to the R&B hit Turn This Mother Out, Let's Get Started would go double platinum and kick off Hammer's career on the right foot. But as impressive as his debut album was, it wouldn't hold a candle to what came next. Hammer's second album for Capitol would turn into his masterpiece. Released in 1990, Please Hammer, Don't Hurt Him, it would become the first hip-hop album to ever sell more than 10 million copies. Now, how did he do it? Come on, you already know the answer. You can't touch this. Now, of course you know the song You Can't Touch This, but you might not know that this was a blatant ripoff of Rick James's seminal hit Super Freak. Well, if you didn't know, now you do. Now, most people, they didn't actually care at the time, but soon enough they would. And, the track, it was just goddamn too catchy. Everyone became obsessed with MC Hammer. Now, the single would dominate the radio and MTV on its path to winning 2 Grammys for Best R&B Song, as well as Best Solo Rap Performance. Now, Hammer's next 2 singles, Have You Seen Her, which was a full-on cover of the Chai Lights original ballad, as well as Pray, which contained the hook from Prince's When Doves Cry, they would continue his reliance on other people's music to produce his own hits. Yet, both of these tracks followed You Can't Touch This onto the top 10. But then the backlash, it would hit. After 3 immensely popular singles, none of which contained much in the way of original composition from the man himself, critics began to refer to Hammer's frequent use of sampling as something more akin to stealing. And then there were those hip-hop purists who almost never took Hammer seriously enough to begin with, who continually pointed out his simplistic and at times, repetitive lyrics. You know, you can't please everyone, but when the mob outweighs the fans, things get ugly. Once the tried and true entertainment merchandising machine cooked into capitalizing on Hammer's mainstream appeal, this resulted in MC Hammer dolls and even Saturday morning cartoon shows. I mean, Hollywood was pushing him forward, but people were saying enough is enough.
And it seemed at this point in time, well, almost everyone had their fill of MC Hammer. In other words, it was time for a break. And as a means to retaliate against the criticism, well, Hammer would drop the MC from his moniker and implement more live instrumentation into his music. And while his third studio album, 1991's Too Legit to Quit, sold relatively well, at this point Hammer's reach, it had exceeded his grasp. Now his fifth studio album, The Funky Headhunter, would be his last to go platinum, and a year later when he dropped his Inside Out in 1995, would be the final time an album of Hammer's would ever chart. At the height of his power and popularity, Hammer had earned himself a net worth estimated to be around $33 million. Now he employed a staff of close to 200 people, and he rolled with an entourage that was said to be at least 40 deep. Now with all of those people in his orbit, Hammer was paying close to $500,000 a month just to support his entire crew. And of course, as someone who broke new ground on the musical front, he wasn't content with simply living in some sprawling estate that already existed. Not at all. Instead, he'd break new ground again, this time in the hills above the neighborhood that he grew up in a 40,000 square foot home that would wind up costing him an unbelievable $30 million to build. Yeah, for those of you keeping track, that's basically all he had plus 6 months. So, damn, the guy spent it all. He also established the Oaktown Stable, which would house 19 thoroughbred horses, including the colt named Dance Floor, who finished third in the 1992 Kentucky Derby. Meanwhile, Hammer, he was dropping millions on Lamborghinis, private jets, helicopters, and even a stretch limo. Basically, Hammer, he was living the life he always wanted to live, and even for someone as successful as he was, it was still beyond his means. In 1996, he officially declared for bankruptcy.
But am I broke by these hardworking people, everyday people? No, I'm not broke by that standard, and it's kind of unfair to other people, I'm not broke by that, yeah.
Now, as you might imagine, this new development, it hit Hammer hard. Now, it also prompted something of a hearkening back to his roots and a religious awakening. Now, afterwards, he began writing new material with an emphasis on spirituality and his family. In 1998, he recorded an album titled Family Affair that was slated for release on his own label, but after 1,000 copies were pressed, the album release was canceled and the project, it's barely seen the light of day. That's outside of, some hard-to-find internet versions. After that, several more projects were rumored to be in the works, but none ever manifested until the early 2000s, when Hammer would release a string of independent projects with titles like Active Duty, Full Blast, Look, 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 and Dance Jam the Music. Now, none of it was particularly successful. Thankfully, Hammer, he still had one last card to play. Now, beyond reinventing himself as a minister, Hammer would also use what little money he had left from his run on top of the charts to invest in some technology startups. Now, Hammer says that he first became interested in tech companies while filming a music video back in the early 90s. Now, that's when someone told him that music videos would eventually find their way onto the internet. Now, ever since then, Hammer, he's kept his eyes open for potential investment opportunities, and he claims that he was even there to lend some cash to the birth of both YouTube and Twitter.
And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna be the first to get it right with video over the internet. Before Prince do it, or before Michael do it, or before Janet do it. So anyway.
Now, all of that is to say, little by little, Hammer eventually rebuilt his financial empire. Sure, it never reached the same heights as it once did in the early 90s, but now that Hammer had grown so much as both a man and an artist, he's in a much better place to navigate the rest of his financial life. Now, he's also recently taken the opportunity to share some of his knowledge and remind us that he's a deep thinker as well. Now, when one Twitter user last month posted the idea that philosophy is nothing more than a flirtation with ideas while science is commitment to the truth, Hammer came flying in off the top rope, reminding us all that when you measure, include the measurer. That is deep. Went for me. I think what he's trying to get at, as he points out in this tweet, the history of science has been plagued for centuries with individuals perpetuating non-truths. There needs to be a balance. As for whether or not Hammer is ultimately happy with how his life and his career played out, he says that he really wouldn't want things to have turned out any other way. Now, a few years ago, in fact, he told Oprah, "My real true answer is I wouldn't change one thing. I really believe in the butterfly effect, meaning that if I change one thing, everything else changes. So I'm very happy with my decision. And every once in a while, Hammer, he'll pop up out of the blue with a new track, like Raider Nation in 2014, and an updated version of his 1990 song, Help the Children, in 2017. Now you can also catch him over on Instagram, where he regularly posts updates on his whereabouts and the occasional throwback clip from his days when he was at the top of the industry. But no matter what he's doing, well, it's simply good to see that MC Hammer, he isn't nearly as dead or buried as many people seem to assume. Now, sure, he might still be remembered best for losing all that money and, well, making parachute pants a thing. And that's a gag sometimes he's still gotta run with. But hey, at least the guy's still got a sense of humor.
Redfoo was born Stephon Gordy and is the son of Berry Gordy, the famous founder of Motown Records. As such, Redfoo is entrenched in the music industry from an early age. His dad would introduce him to some of the biggest musicians in the world, which sparked Redfoo's interest in the family business, including a once-in-a-lifetime type run-in with the iconic Michael Jackson. Yes, that Michael Jackson.
And I just fell asleep. I don't really remember. My mom's like, he tucked you in and did all this stuff. I said, well, I don't know. I was knocked out.
That's hilarious.
Now, as a youngster, Redfoo originally wanted to pursue a career in tennis, but a wrist injury while snowboarding would bring him back to his love for hip-hop. He began his career largely as a producer for other artists, people like Ahmad and the Black Eyed Peas, and then he'd release his first album alongside fellow rapper Drake Kroon in 1997, titled Balance Beam. It would still take Redfoo nearly 10 years for his big break to arrive when will.i.am introduced both he and his young cousin Sky Blue, whose real name is Skylar Gordy, to Interscope Records. Working together from that point on, Redfoo and Sky Blue dubbed themselves LMFAO and began building a local buzz through smaller venues and radio play. It would take them 2 years of work before they released their first album, Party Rock, in 2008, which featured singles like I'm in Miami and Shot, 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 Shot. Wait, is that Lil Wayne? Lil Jon. Brain fart. The album wasn't exactly a smashing success, but it did go certified gold and gained enough traction for LMFAO to release their follow-up album in 2011 titled Sorry for Party Rocking, an album that would feature their two biggest hits, Sexy and I Know It, and of course, Party Rock Anthem. Interestingly, according to Story of Song, the single that would turn LMFAO into a household name wasn't even written for them in the first place. In fact, it was written by producer Goon Rock for Flo Rida, but Redfoo and Sky Blue got their hands on it first, and we all thank God. We didn't know it at the time, but Party Rock Anthem's ultimate fate should have probably given us a clue as to what would happen with LMFAO as well. The song blazed brightly, only to burn out mercifully. It was officially awarded certified diamond status and is also the 6th biggest Billboard single of all time, but only months after performing with Madonna at the Super Bowl halftime show, LMFAO would disappear into the sunset forever. You gotta kind of, when it's a sunset, you gotta whisper, forever. Just gotta let it trail off. Why? Well, perhaps because their 4th single from the album stalled on the charts and it suddenly seemed as if the general music listening public was more or less done with these two. Many expected them to double down on their efforts and release new music, but then the unthinkable happened. The announcement of their indefinite hiatus. At the time, Redfoo told News.com, I feel like we've been doing this for so long, 5 or 6 years, and we're kind of like saying, well, let's just do what's natural and just kind of explore that instead of like forcing it all the time. From that point on, Redfoo and Sky Blue went their separate ways. Redfoo traveled to Australia, where he embarked on something of a solo career. He joined the panel for the Australian X Factor in 2013 and discovered newfound popularity. There, his single Let's Get Ridiculous shot straight to #1 on the national charts and went 4 times platinum. He even returned for a second stint on X Factor and released a follow-up single, New Thang, which peaked at #3 on Australian charts. It seemed like his solo dream was coming true. But then he teamed up with other musicians like Plain Skills, Lil Jon, and Inertia McFly to release a track titled Literally I Can't, which was more or less the actual response from anyone who ever listened to the thing. The track suffered majorly from being labeled misogynistic, and just like that, Redfoo's career in Australia was over. He was booted from the next season of X Factor, and after being attacked at a local bar, he was as done with the land down under as they were with him.
I'm talking to some girls right here, and boom, I feel,
Redfoo returned to Hollywood and joined Dancing with the Stars for the 2015 season, but would find himself the first one to be eliminated.
I'm just happy that I got the chance, to dance.
He then finally debuted his solo album in 2016 titled Party Rock Mansion, but his record sales were pretty terrible. We're talking only selling around 144 copies in Australia terrible. Suddenly, Redfoo was looking for other ways to keep busy. Rightfully so. That 144? He dabbled with the idea of returning to his first love of tennis after dating tennis player Victoria Azarenka for a hot second, and even found himself on the same court as tennis legend Serena Williams. And people, This is the life of the rich. I've never seen anything like this. This is a professional game.
Serena to win this point.
They stopped a match for him to just play around. Is this what being rich is? But he was far too old at this point for this to go anywhere in terms of a professional career as an athlete. And after breaking up with Victoria, Redfoo moved on to his current girlfriend, Jasmine Al-Khoury, a chef and road manager who now lives with him. These two have thoroughly embraced the vegan lifestyle and update their fans on social media platforms like Instagram and YouTube regularly with their daily lives and routines.
Because I want to be educated. I was eating honey and I was happily doing it when someone pointed out that honey is from a bee and that the bees are the animals and you can't eat the honey from the bee.
As for Redfoo's nephew Sky Blue, well, his story's a little more complicated. For the most part, he's kept a much quieter profile. He waited until 2013 to release his first solo project, unveiling a 9-track album titled Rebel Music that he gave away online to his fans for free. He followed that up with Chaos to Consciousness in 2017, which was received much more favorably from critics than any music Redfoo had released since their breakup. But if any of you are hoping for an LMFAO reunion anytime soon, then I've got bad news for you. Because despite how optimistic Redfoo might have appeared off the top of this video, these two have a lot of work to get through still. Back in 2017, Sky Blue posted a scathing letter on his Facebook page that he has since deleted that called his uncle's behavior and treatment of him into question. He revealed that the true reason the band went their separate ways stemmed from a back injury he incurred. He wrote on Facebook, "My back went out right before a big arena show in 2011. You went out and performed, but then just left on the tour bus without seeing me. In fact, you didn't speak to me after that for about a year, which is around the time you announced our hiatus. You even kept touring as LMFAO and made a lot of money doing it. I really loved you. I looked up to you, man, but the more successful we got, the more you wanted control." Sky Blue was understandably upset, and as someone who deeply cared, loved, and always supported Redfoo, he felt like his uncle had turned his back on him. He went on to tell Redfoo that he had significantly damaged their brand with the release of his last album. This tirade apparently stemmed from the fact that on the eve of dropping his own newest release, Sky Blue was served with a letter from Redfoo's lawyers that stated he would be getting 0 LMFAO royalties. This was all compounded by the fact that Rick Ross had filed a lawsuit against LMFAO in 2013, stating that Every Day I'm Shuffling was a ripoff of his lyrics Every Day I'm Hustling, because duh. It would take 6 years for this lawsuit to work itself out and for the two parties to come to some form of settlement, the details of which have never been released. But during the process, Rick Ross revealed that Redfoo was holding up all the proceedings by keeping Sky Blue in the dark in regards to everything that was happening. All of this is to say that a once thriving family business has suddenly gone awry. And while LMFAO are no longer party rocking as a duo, they've always have a place in our hearts. Well, some of our hearts.
Sean Kingston was born Kashawn Anderson on February 3rd, 1990 in Miami, Florida. When Sean was 6, his parents packed up all their belongings and moved the family to Kingston, Jamaica. But they didn't exactly end up living the perfect island paradise type of life. At the age of only 11, Sean was charged with the crime of breaking and entering, and that was just the start. Over the next few years of his life, he'd spend 21 days in jail and be court ordered to attend boot camp, and eventually he'd wind up living in a car all by his lonesome after his mother was arrested on charges of identity fraud. With a reputation like that, you'd think that life may have turned out differently for Sean than it has. But here's the thing, my man was always able to write killer hooks, and this ability led him to pursuing Miami's talent show circuit, where he'd meet other performers like Pitbull, Ludacris, and Trick Daddy. Eventually, record producer J.R. Rodham caught wind of his demo tape and signed the young star to his Beluga Heights label. From there, the major labels caught wind of his talent and created a full-scale bidding war that the Sony imprint Epic eventually won. They introduced their newest artist in 2007 with his first official single, Colors, featuring The Game and Rick Ross. And you know what's the crazy part? At this point in his life, Sean Kingston was only still 16 years old, and he was about to get even more famous because his second single, one that used the sample of Benny King's Stand By Me, would turn Kingston into a household name. That track being Beautiful Girls. You know that song that goes, "Man, attractive women make me want to kill myself." Yeah, that one. Banger.
We got that right, bro. It was like we just knew. The whole room was like, yo, this is man.
As the breakthrough single off his debut self-titled studio album, Beautiful Girls, helped Kingston claim the 6th spot on the Billboard 200, which is a pretty spectacular achievement for a first-time record. Unfortunately, Kingston wasn't exactly able to recapture lightning in a bottle with his second album, Tomorrow. Singles like Fire Burning and Face Dropped helped sell units, but for comparison's sake, Kingston's sophomore album peaked at the 37th spot on the Billboard 200, which is obviously a far cry away from the top 10. Then, in 2011, things got even worse. While out enjoying himself on open water in May of 2011 in Miami, Florida, Kingston was involved in a horrific jet ski accident that nearly took his life. While traveling at around 35 miles per hour, he miscalculated how high the tide was, which resulted in both he and his female passenger being thrown from the vehicle. Kingston would wind up colliding with a nearby bridge and be rushed to hospital in critical condition.
Kingston and his female passenger both ended up in the water.
We don't know if it was a direct hit or if it was a glancing blow. They did collide with the bridge and they ended up in the water.
Kingston's condition was dire. After 11 days, it finally seemed like he was getting better, but then he felt a pain in his chest, and it turns out he had a torn aorta and had to have emergency heart surgery. After the successful operation, Kingston was told by his doctor that many people don't survive that type of procedure he underwent and that he must have a guardian angel watching out for him. As one might expect, this event had long-lasting effects in Kingston's life. On one hand, it kicked off a series of death rumors about the artist that had continued to persist to this day, with many people seemingly undergoing some type of Mandela effect where they believe that he did indeed die that day. I promise you he didn't.
People don't know that. That's why it was a rumor that I died, is because it really was like...
You died twice?
Twice in the hospital, yeah. I had open heart surgery and everything, man. What time?
This near-death experience also made Kingston stand up and take stock of his career. He scrapped his original plans for his third studio album and wound up creating a record called Back to Life, which dropped in 2013. But if I'm being honest, this album barely moved the needle upon release. I mean, maybe there was still some holdover from the Mandela effect thing, but people just simply didn't seem to even know that this project existed. After the disappointment of his third studio album and still dealing with the after effects of his accident, Kingston took a big step back from the music scene following 2013. Outside of a couple guest spots, Kingston wouldn't make another song that was wholly his own until 2016, at which point he would continue to sporadically release singles here and there, with titles like One Away, Chance, and All I Got. But as much as the accident threw a monkey wrench into his life, Kingston also recognizes that it may have been somewhat of a blessing in disguise. Having come so close to losing his life taught Kingston to count his blessings and to keep God present at all times. So even if he was going through a bit of a down period afterwards, Kingston knew that if he kept at it, things would eventually work out.
I have a great relationship with God, and I felt like, you know, I owe him a lot. For him to give me a second chance back at life, back to doing what I love to do, back to music and back in this industry, back, you know what I'm saying? Everything it starts with the word back, so I feel like it's only right, back to life.
After spending a considerable amount of time writing for other artists like Chris Brown and Lil Mosey, while also trying to get out of his deal with Epic, Kingston would wind up having to buy himself out of the contract so that he would have total and complete control over his music. Now he's teamed up with Empire Records to release his first studio album since 2013. That's right, today Sean is hard at work on his big comeback album. This beauty is going to be titled Deliverance, and it's slated to drop sometime before the end of this year. In preparation for the album's release, Kingston has released a series of singles, all of which are slated to appear on the album, including Love is Wonderful with Travis Barker and Darkest Times with G Herbo. That latter track in particular was inspired by the series of difficulties that Kingston was experiencing over the last few years. Difficulties that include more than just the jet ski incident. A few months ago, the Beautiful Girls singer made headlines by appearing on the Angela Lee podcast Lip Service and letting everybody in on the details of his sex life. Turns out, not only does he have an entire lineup of starters that he keeps in rotation, but he's basically got a 5-member bench as well. Yes, this man has a full roster. To each his own.
I got 10 girls that I keep
rotation.
Yeah.
Oh my God, 10? That's a lot. Local or like across the country?
That's over the years. No, I'm talking about all in general. But that's not bad though. If you talk about, and these girls know me for like 2-3 years, you feel me?
But I think the part that really got people talking was when Kingston admitted that protection is more or less the furthest thing from his mind when it comes time to romance. More recently, Kingston has made the news for getting into a violent altercation with a music video director who had been staying with him at his home in Los Angeles. The director works under the handle Godlike, and he says that after 3 months of working closely with Kingston, Sean randomly flew off the handle and assaulted him. Apparently, Sean cornered the guy around 2 a.m. one night and demanded that he film something. The director had something of a mental lapse and couldn't remember the name of an app that he needed to transfer some files to, which is what reportedly sent Kingston into an absolute rage. The director says that Kingston then allegedly punched him in the face and dragged him down a hallway and pulled out a gun before telling him to pack up and leave. Needless to say, he did exactly that. Only he stopped at a police station on his way out of town and filed a report, including photo evidence of his battered face. So what exactly is going on here? I'll be honest, the story is a little suspect. I mean, either that or Kingston has some major anger and impulse control issues. A rep from Kingston has of course denied all of these claims and promises they will be disproven in due time.
Macaulay Carson Culkin was born on August 26, 1980 in New York City, New York, to Christopher Kit Culkin and Patricia Brentrup. His parents never married, but they sure like making babies, with Macaulay being the third of 7 children living in a seedy Manhattan 2-bedroom apartment. The family had little to no money. His mother worked as a telephone operator, and his father was a caretaker at a local church. Now his dad's story is a pretty interesting one. He himself had been a child actor, and his mom, well, she was a stage actress. As a teenager, he made it to Broadway, but his acting career never came to fruition as an adult. His sister Bonnie Bedelia had better luck, playing Bruce Willis's love interest in Die Hard, and she's still a working actress today. Now Kit pushed his firstborn Shane into acting at Manhattan's Ensemble Studio Theater. Young Macaulay was just tagging along when he got the eye of casting directors and landed a stage role in After School Special. From there he was enrolled in a professional acting school, and he later trained in ballet. He appeared in several stage performances before he moved on to movies. His first was in a film titled Rocket Gibraltar. Gibraltar, yeah, that's it.
They cast the boat into the water. They built huge bonfires on the beach. Then the men would light the tips of their arrows in the bonfires and shoot them at the ship.
Next up, he starred as Farrah Fawcett's son in See You in the Morning, and then he landed the role of John Candy's nephew in Uncle Buck. This was directed by John Hughes.
Where's your wife?
Don't have one.
How come?
It's a long story.
Do you have kids?
No, I don't.
How come?
It's an even longer story.
Are you my dad's brother?
What's your record for consecutive questions asked?
38.
For that role, Macaulay was paid $40,000, and John Hughes was so impressed by Culkin's performance that he wrote a screenplay specifically for him titled Home Alone.
Other than that, I'm in good shape.
Young Macaulay was paid $200,000 for his work. Home Alone had a production budget of $19 million and went on to become the highest grossing film of 1990. It earned $500 million in total at the box office and was the biggest moneymaker since E.T. and Star Wars. Although money was coming in, Macaulay's dad had stepped into the role of manager and was very resistant to spend his family's new fortune. During this time, Macaulay still didn't have his own bed or bedroom. He would sleep on the couch with his brother. It was during this time that he was first introduced to Michael Jackson, who had plenty of beds.
He kind of recognized me because it was after I'd done Uncle Buck, and so he kind of mentioned something, and then he calls me up kind of out of the blue, and it's kind of just this weird random thing, and he was like, why don't you come over to my house?
The two would spend time together going to Disneyland and playing video games. They worked together, with Macaulay appearing in Michael Jackson's video for Black and White. And yes, of course, there were sleepovers.
When I slept in his bedroom, yeah, but you have to understand the whole scenario. And the thing is with Michael, is that he's not very good at explaining himself, and he never really has been.
For Macaulay's next role in My Girl, he became the first child star to command a salary of $1 million. After the financial success of Home Alone, Macaulay got to work on Home Alone 2, but this time his father had some demands, which included he be paid $5 million and earn a percentage of the gross. He also insisted that Fox Studios cast Macaulay in another film that they had in production. It was titled The Good Son. Kid Culkin got his way on all these demands, and Home Alone 2 was another massive success.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
Down the hall and grab him by the pussy.
Thanks.
By now, his family had moved into 2 sprawling apartments in Manhattan's cultured Upper West Side. And his parents, well, they were rolling in dough because they were collecting 15% in management fees. Macaulay's payment was bumped up to $8 million for his next 2 films, getting even with Dad and Richie Rich. But unfortunately, these weren't as hot at the box office, and executives were starting to feel that people had had their fill of Macaulay's charisma. During this time, Macaulay also pleaded with his father for some time off. He wanted to have a summer vacation like any other kid his age, but his dad knew that they had to keep going while the going was good. Macaulay was also starting to get a bit of a bad boy reputation, and there were stories of him throwing cigarette and alcohol-fueled parties when he was clearly underage.
Yeah, I'm a kid, I had a beer, you know, I smoked a joint. Big deal, you know what I'm saying?
In 1994, at the age of 14, Macaulay was worth an estimated $17 million and decided that he wanted to quit acting, and just like that, things would start to fall apart. His mother kicked his father out of their apartment, so he moved into another one in the building. In 1995, the 2 parents went to court over custody of their children and control of Macaulay's massive wealth. And also, they had to split apart that 15% they raked in. A lot of money. Now, I'm not entirely sure how this all played out. The information might not be public, but Macaulay and his family have had no contact with their father ever since.
Never been to jail or rehab, and my parents didn't steal all my money and all those other child star cliches.
So how many lies have you read about you in tabloids?
Oh, millions. So yeah, I mean, forget about it.
With Macaulay quitting acting, he made attempts to blend in as a normal youth. He attended a private high school in Manhattan, but dropped out in his senior year. In 1998, he became engaged and married to Rachel Miner. She too had grown up as a child actress and is still working today. That same year, Macaulay became the godfather to Michael Jackson's daughter Paris. And while researching this video, I also read rumors that they believe that Blanket is actually Macaulay's kid, like his DNA. I can't confirm that though, just really weird.
Yeah. That is weird.
In 1998, there was a fire in the apartment home to Macaulay's mother and 3 of his younger siblings. 4 people were killed in the fire, and his mother was sued for $80 million. Now, I have no idea how that played out. I don't know if it's public information, but yeah. And then more devastating news would come when Macaulay and his wife would call it quits after 2 years.
Never marry your childhood sweetheart.
In 2002, he began dating Mila Kunis, who at the time was working on That 70s Show. He also began to reappear on films as an actor. First up was Party Monster, the true life story of the rise and fall of a young club promoter.
I want you to teach me how to be fabulous. Don't dream it, be it.
Fabulous!
So it should come as no surprise that I ended up in New York City.
There were more traditional gigs like an appearance on Will and Grace. Then in 2004, he was arrested in Oklahoma City for possession of marijuana. Also prescription drugs with no prescription, including Xanax and Klonopin, both used for panic disorders. He was briefly jailed and received 3 one-year suspended prison terms and was ordered to pay $540 in fees. In 2005, Macaulay defended Michael Jackson at the pop star's molestation trial. He called the allegations against Jackson absolutely ridiculous. In 2006, he published a semi-autobiographical novel titled Junior, and in an interview he stated, "I really disassociated myself from Macaulay Culkin mentally. Like if someone actually calls out that name on the street, I don't turn my head. Literally, when I was 14 and I quit, I said I'm never doing that again. Say whatever you want about me, that I'm crazy, that I'm an alcoholic, call me a drug addict, I don't give a shit anymore. That's not me anymore, that's for you, it's yours, go ahead, have fun." More tragedy would strike in 2008 when his younger sister Dakota was killed in a car accident. The next year, he would lose his lifelong friend Michael Jackson and attended his funeral. Macaulay continued to work, appearing in commercials. He appeared in WWE Raw and in some various online series. His relationship ended with Mila Kunis in 2011. Following this, there were tabloids claiming that he'd become addicted to heroin. Rumors he shot down, stating, "I was not pounding 6 grand of heroin every month or whatever. The thing that bugged me was tabloids wrapping it all in this weird guise of concern. No, you're trying to shift papers." Around this time, there was also an internet death hoax made in his name. Macaulay had began making movies as an independent artist. There was his video in which he simply ate a piece of pizza. Now, I rolled a clip from that in the intro, but there's a reason it might seem familiar. He began working heavily with the band members of Moldy Peaches, and they filmed an entire movie on an iPhone titled The Wrong Ferrari. He split his time between LA and New York and found refuge in France, where no one knew that he was the kid from Home Alone. Macaulay made global headlines in 2015 with his cover band Pizza Underground, which toured the US. And of course, there was his viral video in which he played himself as an Uber driver still recovering from the torment of Harry and Marv.
It's Christmas time. It's fucking Christmas. And your whole family, right, goes on vacation. Whole family. And they forget their 8-year-old fucking son. Their 8-year-old son.
More recently, Macaulay has been looking pretty happy and healthy. He's also got a new girlfriend in Brenda Song, who also grew up as a child actress. So clearly he has a type.
Dismissed! Bring in the dancing lobsters!
Amanda Bynes was born on April 3rd, 1986 in Thousands Oaks, California to parents Rick and Lynn Bynes. Her father, a dentist, her mother, a dental assistant, and the family is of Jewish, Irish, and Polish descent. The youngest of 3, Amanda showed her knack for theatrics extremely early on. No pun intended. Well, maybe a little bit. She got her big acting break at the age of 7, appearing in a Nestle's candy commercial. From there, she would go on to star in Nickelodeon's show All That.
And then there was
like a graduation night, and that's where the producers of the show, like Brian Robbins and Dan Schneider, came on the show, and they saw me there. So
And that was it? You just got discovered right off of the comedy camp?
Yeah.
After landing a whole bunch of smaller roles, she then had Nickelodeon create a show around her at 13 years of age. They titled it The Amanda Show. She later moved on to big budget films like What a Girl Wants, She's the Man, Hairspray, and Easy A. Now Hairspray, that was actually filmed here in Toronto, and I myself used to work on Toronto film sets. And the word from the crew was that Amanda was always chasing around Zac Efron looking for sex, but he wasn't into it. Although I have a feeling John Travolta was probably also looking for sex off him, so he was just like, I'm tired of all this. Amanda's career was on a high, but then in 2011, she sent out a seemingly innocent tweet alluding that she needed a break, having been in the business since she was a child. She tweeted out, I don't love acting anymore, so I'm not gonna do it. She tweeted out those words. She then went on to take a few more acting jobs, but eventually, well, the well would dry up. In 2012, she debuted a new light purple hairdo. The next day, she was stopped by an LAPD officer, but she decided, what the heck, I'ma speed away from the scene. The following month, she would crash into another cop car. This resulted in a DUI, and it has been reported that the following day, she had another collision on the freeway. Now, prior to her court case, she was looking for a little help, so she took to Twitter to ask President Obama. She tweeted, Hey Barack Obama, I don't drink, please fire the cop who arrested me. I also don't hit and run. The end. In August of 2012, she got into another car accident and fled the scene. A few weeks later, well, TMZ, they captured photos of her smoking a bong while driving. Yeah, well, the girl was soon to get her license suspended. From there, she would go on to do a lot of weird stuff, operating via foot. She moved to New York City, where she would lock herself in all sorts of public bathrooms. There were also stories of her attending spinning classes, where she would be wearing sexy lingerie, and stories of her at tanning salons, where she would wear nothing at all, except the goggles. Now that one I'm cool with, because I mean, like, you're already getting naked there, it's mostly girls. I wouldn't mind the show. But anyway, someone had a problem with it. Now let's fast forward to 2013, the year when someone really should have taken away her cell phone. Amanda Bynes took to Twitter calling out half of Hollywood. She chose Drake, Jay-Z, Jenny McCarthy, Miley Cyrus, Lance Bass, Courtney Love, Rihanna, as well as Obama and Zac Efron. She called them all ugly. Now to me it sounds like a bit of sour apples with Zac Efron and Obama. But anyway, she would later change her tune to Drake, asking him to murder her vagina. Amanda, we're asking you to put down the phone. But she didn't. She followed these tweets with some erotic photos. She showed off her shaved head, her boobs bursting out of a black bra, face piercing, and some joint smokage. She also tossed a bong out of her New York City apartment window, and she got into a whole bunch of other fights on Twitter. Then on July 22nd, 2013, Amanda Bynes was put on involuntary psychiatric hold after starting a fire on a random stranger's driveway. Now this fire that she had started, it was just a few houses away from her childhood home in Thousand Oaks. Unfortunately, this isn't where the story ends. When Amanda got out of the psychiatric hold, her beef was now with that of her father. She stated that her father had mentally and physically abused her as a child, but these were words she would soon take back, stating that a metal chip had been put in her head and it was causing her to say these crazy things. Amanda Bynes would then move back to New York, where she would travel around town barefoot and alone. And my job at the time, well, it was to report on everything Hollywood on IO Trends. Let's take a look. The Amanda Bynes crazy train has rolled into New York City. Club-going fans might want to keep their admiration and selfies to themselves because she attacked one fan with her nails. That's so street. Finally, by the end of 2014, well, we got some answers. Amanda tweeted out, I was diagnosed bipolar and manic depressive, so I'm on medication and I'm seeing my psychologist and my psychiatrist weekly, so I'm fine. As of recent, well, Amanda, she is staying out of the public spotlight. When she goes in public, she does wear sunglasses, and she's kind of keeping it low-key. No more crazy stuff on her social media, just positive stuff from time to time. We wish her all the best. She's also enrolled in an Orange County fashion program, so she'll be styling other artists. Congratulations, that's crazy stuff.
I know, what's wrong with me? I don't know. It's shocking how it's become popular to go to rehab, right?
Born Bobby Ray Simmons on November 15th, 1988 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Bob, B.o.B, would soon after move to the east side of Atlanta and settle into a suburb known as Decatur. hope I'm pronouncing that right, Atlanta goons, please stay out of my DMs.
From Decatur, Georgia.
It was while living here that making music became an early hobby of his, and B.o.B began his musical education by learning to play the trumpet and other instruments throughout grade school. By the time he was in high school, the kid had already secured himself a management deal with hit-making producer Jim Johnson, who had just recently started his own Atlantic imprint label, Rebel Rock. At the time, Jim was searching for his first signee. That's when his assistant caught Bobby performing his track, Cloud 9, at the TLS Club Crucial in Atlanta, and suddenly recognized that they had found their man. When Jim met Bob, he was blown away by the young man's technical skill. Not only could he play the keyboard, the kid was also producing his own tracks, writing his own melodies, as well as singing and rapping. Soon after getting him signed, they paired him up with T.I., who agreed to bring B.o.B under his own label, Grand Hustle Records. With a ton of studio backing behind him, B.o.B got to work, but the initial output that he would produce would have more of an impact on music executives and critics than it did the public at large. Having developed himself in the underground hip-hop scene by performing at local clubs and dropping projects on sites like Dat Piff, his earliest mixtapes like Hi, My Name is B.o.B and B.o.B vs. Bobby Ray earned him a core following, but failed to pick up any mainstream exposure. With his career seemingly continuing to stall out, B.o.B was becoming understandably frustrated, but that's when Nothing on You would finally see release, and everything would change from that point forward. According to a former Atlantic A&R executive, B.o.B's #1 hit started off as a record written by the Smeezingtons. Who? It's a really good question. This was a production team that just so happened to be headlined by a man you probably know much better under the name of Bruno Mars. Wow, I didn't know that. Fuck. Atlantic executives knew that that song was something special, but at first they wanted to give it to rapper Lupe Fiasco. Why this song never made it to Lupe, nobody quite knows, but after hearing B.o.B recorded a verse for the track, those same execs decided to let him have it and flew Bruno Mars in to finish the production. From that point forward, things began to move into overdrive. Nothing on You debuted in late 2009, and a few months later, B.o.B would drop the music video. Anchored by that extremely popular release, B.o.B would finally unleash his debut studio album, The Adventures of Bobby Ray. It was a monumental hit and contained a series of singles that would turn B.o.B's life around. Topping the Billboard 200 and earning multiple Grammy nominations, the album would lead Nothing on You entering the top 10 for the first time and kick off a 23-week consecutive stretch in which B.o.B would have at least one single in that same region of the charts. In June, B.o.B would unleash his follow-up single Airplanes, which would climb as high as the 2 spot on the top 10 charts. And man, this song was something else. Every single teenage girl had these lyrics in their Facebook status. I don't know, you may be too young to remember, but there was a time when people treated Facebook like Twitter and used it as like a diary to like tweet lyrics and subtweet their girlfriends and stuff. And you know, Can I Get a Wish Right Now was top of the list for girls. I'll just leave it at that. And a few months later, he'd pull off a hat trick with the release of Magic. Between his own hit singles and a series of massive collaborations like Price Tag with Jessie J, B.o.B was laying the groundwork for a career that should have been able to maintain its momentum for years to come. And yet, it wouldn't last. In the span of only a few months, B.o.B had gone from living at home with his mom to sharing the spotlight with acts like Drake, Kid Cudi, and Wale. It was a peak that his career has yet to see since again. Things began to go south when B.o.B struggled dealing with his newfound fame. In retrospect, he wishes that he had the chance to mentally prepare himself for what was to come. He would tell Billboard in 2020, "All of a sudden I have these huge Grammy-nominated records and I'm traveling the world. It's almost like the world didn't get to discover who I was. I was just these records. That was something that was hard for me to deal with for the longest time." In fact, B.o.B would grow more and more concerned with how the public was perceiving him, especially within his own community of Atlanta. He began to feel like the more music he made, the more he was drifting away from being B.o.B from the underground. Instead, the emphasis for his career was always on finding the next hit on the same level as Nothing on You. In hopes of accomplishing this, his label would team up with acts like Lil Wayne, Nicki Minaj, and even Taylor Swift. In fact, it was his collaboration with Swift, Both of Us, that finally proved to be something of a breaking point. When that single failed to crack the top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, B.o.B would begin to push back against those execs looking for a more pop-related production. Underground Luxury would become his last major label release, after which he parted from Atlantic and Rebel Rock. In 2014, he'd form his own label, No Genre, and from that point forward, he would self-release his own music. But over the next few years, B.o.B would make more headlines for the things he was saying rather than the music he was creating. Things began to take a really strange turn in B.o.B's story in 2015 when he took to Twitter to push a bizarre theory about disappearing children in cloning facilities. He randomly tweeted out, "Hundreds of kids go missing each year, equal cloning center." Now, I may just be a Before They Were Famous host. I'm not a mathematician, but the math's not mathing on that one. I'm not sure. Bit of a reach. I can't exactly figure out the calculus on that equation either, but he would follow it up with claims that people are cloning celebrities so as to establish a new world order. Assume he wasn't talking about these guys.
You can call this the New World Order!
The following year, B.o.B would reveal on Twitter that he was among the select few of us who believe the world to be flat. Like a piece of paper, like two-dimensional. The whole world, that's what he believes. I mean, I'm not judging, just saying. And because B.o.B was still such a big name at the time, popular scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson would strike back and suggest that it's a problem when people with a public voice began spouting nonsense. This little mini beef would result in diss tracks from both individuals. Yes, even Neil deGrasse Tyson went and got his nephew Tyson to record a track called Flat to Fact. And when I think about it now, there's like I think a long list of rappers that Neil deGrasse Tyson has had beef with. And I don't know if that says something about the intelligence of rappers or if just Neil deGrasse Tyson's about that life. He's keeps that same energy. Wants all the smoke. Don't want it with Neil deGrasse Tyson, I'll tell you that. Rather than retract his prior statements, B.o.B would double down with the idea of launching his own Kickstarter campaign to launch satellites in order to prove that his theory was true, but it never reached its $1 million goal. Flash forward to today, and B.o.B does not exactly regret the things that he said. He just wishes that he wasn't as assertive as he was. Today, people still flood his comments and mentions with their own crazy ideas, and he gets tired of having to deal with all of them. He told Billboard, "It definitely gets exhausting with people. When your inbox goes from girls sending you nudes to people sending you philosophy essays, it definitely takes some of the fun out of having a cell phone." The backlash from what happened in the mid-2010s would lead to B.o.B taking a step back from the public eye after the release of his 2018 album, Naga. Jesus Christ, I don't even know what it's about, but I can imagine. It proved to be a short-lived retirement, however, and the following year, he was back with the mixtape Southmatic, followed up by his 2020 album, Simonia. But all the same time, B.o.B put a stop to his interviews and media appearances. He's only recently begun to re-emerge over the past year or two with the creation of his own podcast, the B.o.B Cast, which he co-hosts with his sisters Tiffany and Cameron. Today, B.o.B isn't making any concrete plans about what his future might hold in the terms of his career. Instead, he's working on himself first, like getting engaged to his girlfriend Tiff. In fact, for the first time in his life, B.o.B believes he's ready to finally discover his place in the world.
Shia Sadie LaBeouf was born on June 11, 1986 in Los Angeles, California. Now, he grew up in Echo Park, far from the polished image of Hollywood that would later define his career. Now, his mother, Shayna Sadie, was a visual artist and jewelry designer. His father, Jeffrey LaBeouf, was a Vietnam veteran and former clown who struggled with heroin addiction. Now, addiction, it was not a distant issue in the household. LaBeouf has said he witnessed his father using substances, police were called to the home, arguments were frequent, money was inconsistent, and his parents, they eventually separated and financial instability followed. Now, at times, he has said they lived in motels when rents couldn't be paid, and they bounced around most of his childhood. By the age of 10, well, Shia, he began performing stand-up comedy in Los Angeles clubs. Now, these were not youth showcases, these were adult venues. He performed material influenced by older comedians, and he adjusted to get some laughs. He found a manager by calling names out of a phone book and pitching himself directly. He stated his goal was simply just to earn an income, and he saw the entertainment world or comedy as a way he could stabilize his family situation. Now, after comedy, acting followed soon after, and in the late 90s, he began landing small television roles. By the time he reached early adolescence, he was working consistently, and Shia, his father was around, kind of coaching him, managing him, a charismatic man, but someone who was undeniably unreliable. Now, he said the environment forced him to mature quickly and assume responsibility far beyond his age. Now, before the fame, before the headlines, before the controversy, there was a child growing up around addiction, financial stress, and instability who decided early on that performance was survival. Fast forward to the 2000s, and Shia was not just that kid from Disney anymore. He had won himself a Daytime Emmy for his work on Even Stevens, and he started to make the jump into films. Now, Holes, it proved he could carry a studio project. Then Disturbia showed he could open a thriller, but in 2007, everything changed. Transformers hit theaters and made over $700 million globally, and suddenly Shia was not a former child actor trying to grow up on screen. He was the lead in a global blockbuster directed by Michael Bay and backed by Steven Spielberg. Now, this was no small co-star role. He was center frame. Sam Witwicky alongside Megan Fox, Michaela, God, posters, press tours, international premieres, even thinking back to like listening to Optimus Prime say his last words in the first film, it gives me the chills. What made it work was that he was not the typical action hero. He was not some like, Sylvester Stallone, even Mark Wahlberg. He wasn't hyper masculine, but you were rooting for him. He was anxious, fast talking, at times overwhelmed. He was reacting to the chaos instead of controlling it. Now audiences, they related to that. He felt like a human surrounded by CGI. Really, he's the standout star in the entire film. Now the studio immediately looked at him for a sequel. Then came Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, which made even more money, over $800 million worldwide. And at that point, Shia had arrived. But behind the scenes, things were pretty chaotic. There's a story where he was driving down Los Angeles Boulevard and the guy flipped his car, crushed his hand, and instead of waiting around for the cops, he just took off on foot. But his career was red hot. Next came Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That was in 2008, and he was acting opposite Harrison Ford. Again, directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, you don't get invited to one of the most protected franchises in film history unless the industry believes that you are the future. And for a moment, it looked like Shia LaBeouf was. But if you go back and watch interviews from that era, well, something still feels off. He talks fast, sometimes too fast. He jumps between topics. He overshares. He criticizes projects that he's actually promoting. And at one point, he publicly said Indiana Jones, it dropped the ball. Later, the guy had to apologize. Now, the success was massive. The schedule was relentless. He was in his early 20s leading billion-dollar franchises, doing global press tours, and living inside non-stop attention. Now, this rise was historic. It was also super fast. I mean, when fame accelerates faster than someone could process it, well, cracks, they start to show. You might see it in some kind of interview, and then all of a sudden the pressure builds, and boom! In 2013, the tone shifted. Now, up until then, the narrative, it was intense, maybe eccentric, but it was still controllable. But that year, things, well, like the car he was driving, he lost control. It began with a short film titled HowardCantor.com. LaBeouf wrote and directed it, and after its release, well, readers noticed something. Large portions of the dialogue were nearly identical to a 2007 comic by acclaimed graphic novelist Daniel Clowes. Now, this wasn't inspired by, not loosely adapted, it was nearly word for word. And the internet, it called out LaBeouf immediately. Shia responded with an apology on social media, but the apology was again plagiarized. This one was lifted from a Yahoo Answer post. When criticism intensified, he posted more apologies. Some of those were actually plagiarized as well. Now, what could have been handled quietly became a bit of a public spectacle, and people were starting to wonder what the hell was going on with this kid. Then came February 2014 at the Berlin Film Festival during the premiere of Nymphomaniac. Well, Shia, he walked the red carpet wearing a brown paper bag over his head. Written in black marker across the front were the words, "I am not famous anymore." Now, at first, media outlets, they framed this as performance art, another eccentric move from an actor trying to distance himself from the celebrity culture, but his follow-up actions would tell a different story. Later, he actually held an art expo in downtown LA where people could sit with him, remove the bag, and watch him cry day on, day out. This was a stage project titled I Am Sorry, which was held at the Los Angeles Gallery, and he sat alone in a room silently while visitors entered one by one. Now, some reported that he cried during their interactions, others said he appeared emotionally overwhelmed, and the space included objects referencing his past controversies. We're talking props from films, symbolic items tied to public criticism. That was framed as art, but it unfolded like exposure. None ever seen before. During this period, his social media activity became erratic. The statements were cryptic, apologies were inconsistent, there were declarations of retirement followed by reversals, and from a public relations standpoint, well, it was an absolute disaster. From an industry standpoint, it was too risky to book them. Studios depend on reliability, insurance companies, they depend on predictability, and repeated public self-sabotage, well, it kinda erodes both. Now, individually, each incident, it might have been recoverable, but together, they all formed one overwhelming pattern. And that's kind of what Hollywood says. You know, I think this kid's, got him. He's done. He's cooked. Then in June of 2014, Shia attended a performance of Cabaret at Studio 54 in New York City, and by intermission, well, the police had been called. Now, according to witnesses and court reports, well, Shia was smoking inside the theater despite repeated warnings. Now, he was described as disruptive, yelling at actors during the performance, and arguing with audience members nearby. Now, at one point, he reportedly slapped a man seated close to him. Theater staff asked him to leave. He refused. Alan Cummings was there. He was flabbergasted. He said, "You're certainly not a traitor." Or maybe you are. Anyway, when the officers arrived, the situation escalated. Law enforcement reports stated that LaBeouf, well, he became combative and he shouted obscenities. He resisted being escorted out, and videos later surfaced of him being handcuffed backstage. Now, during that arrest, he allegedly shouted variations of "Do you know who I am?" along with explicit threats towards the officers. He was charged with disorderly conduct, harassment, and criminal trespassing, and inside the courtroom the next day, well, he appeared disorientated. At one point, he stuck out his tongue at photographers, and the judge ordered him to undergo treatment and avoid further legal trouble. He later pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct and agreed to continue therapy. Now, fast forward to 2017, and Shia was arrested in Savannah, Georgia at approximately 4 a.m. Now, according to police reports, he approached an officer and a bystander just asking for a cigarette. When he was told no and asked to leave, well, he became confrontational. Officers stated he appeared intoxicated and he was arrested for public drunkenness, disorderly conduct, and obstruction of the law. Now, what turned the incident into a national story was the body cam footage, and in the video, LaBeouf is seen handcuffed, pacing, yelling profanities at the officer, and more. In fact, he actually made racially charged remarks. He accused police officers of targeting him. His speech was erratic, his tone, it was agitated, and at one point, well, he references his status and his financial success. Now, the full footage is several minutes long, it's unfiltered, and damn, another one for Shia where it's like, what are we gonna do with this guy? Someone call Optimus Prime. Days later, Shia, he released a statement saying he was ashamed of his behavior. He acknowledged struggling with alcoholism and stated he was actively taking steps towards sobriety. Now, he eventually pleaded no contest to disorderly conduct, and other charges were dropped as part of a plea deal that included probation. And by 2017, the history, well, it just kept on getting worse. Damn. Now, it's important to note around this time, he did get married. The guy settled down with actress Mia Goth. You know her, she's blowing up now, but unfortunately, that two also fell apart. We'll get to that in a sec. In December of 2020, British singer and actress FKA Twigs, born Talia Barnett, well, she filed a civil lawsuit against Shia in Los Angeles Superior Court. The complaint accused him of sexual battery, assault, and infliction of emotional distress. That would allege the pattern of coercive and controlling behavior during the extent of their relationship, which I believe was a working relationship. LaBeouf responded through emails stating to the New York Times that many of the allegations were not true, and in the same response he wrote, "I've been abusive to myself and everyone around me for years. I have a history of hurting people, the ones closest to me." Now, the impact on his career, it was immediate. He was dropped by his talent agency, CAA. Award campaigns were halted, major roles stopped materializing, and by 2021, well, his identity had shifted from bankable lead actor to a Hollywood liability. In 2022, Shia resurfaced publicly while promoting the film Padre Pio, and during interviews he spoke at length about converting to Catholicism while preparing for the role. He described attending Mass regularly and studying scripture as part of his preparation. Now, he said faith had stabilized him during a period when his career and his personal life were collapsing. Now, in a recorded conversation with Bishop Robert Barron, well, Shia said he had been suicidal before finding renewed purpose through religion. Now, the timing, it drew scrutiny. The civil lawsuit remained active. Public memory of prior arrests had not really faded, and religious conversions didn't end the scrutiny. This wasn't going to give him a hall pass. All is forgiven. It just added another chapter to a story that was still being written. Ugh, I feel bad for the guy. Then we get to early 2026. Well, Shia was arrested in New Orleans during Mardi Gras, and according to local reports, the incident occurred inside a bar in the French Quarter. Now, authorities stated that he allegedly struck 2 individuals during an altercation, and he was charged with simple battery. Now, this arrest, it did not exist in isolation. It landed on the top of the established record. I mean, this guy is constantly getting into the same problems. Now, this is hot off the heels of a recent divorce. Him and Mia Goth, they had been together for nearly a decade, but something broke and he moved from Los Angeles to New Orleans, I guess to start a new life. The Shia LaBeouf's story is no longer one just about talent. It's about trajectory and instability while dealing with global superstardom. This is a bit of a public collapse and a pattern that is on record, and people just keep like scratching their heads. Now, I think this guy could totally come back. There's a part out there, a role, maybe something like Howard Hughes that he can reinvent and take on and really capture the world's respect and admiration again. He's dealing with many an issue, both personal, maybe mental, addictions, whatnot. Anyway, we wish for him nothing but the best. Danielle Peskowitz was born in Boynton Beach. Trying to track down her authentic Instagram account was a little tricky. There are tons of pages under the name Slim Thugga with 3 eyes, or variations of that. But the main account is at Bhad Bhabie on Instagram, spelled with a bunch of H's. We'll show it to you right here. At the time of this recording, it has 1.3 million followers.
So I guess everything's fake now. Like my foot's fake, the bag is fake, the cross is fake. We don't even live in a real house. House is made out of plastic.
Her single mother, Barbara Ann, has apparently been putting up with Danielle's shit for at least 3 years. Let's go through a list of all her bad deeds. She frequently runs away from home and has been arrested 4 or 5 times. She's tested positive for drug use, including Xanax, marijuana, and there are photos of her enjoying a few sips out of a styrofoam cup.
No idea perform.
She steals cars for fun. She's twerked on top of a police car. She fabricated a bag of heroin, placed it in her mother's bathroom, and then phoned the cops on her own mother. She's also stolen her mom's credit cards and charged thousands of dollars to purchase no other than a stripper pole. She's allegedly also threatened her grandma with a knife. She's certainly something else. So where does Danielle get her thick accent from? Well, she says she gets it from the streets.
I'm so finna be sliding. You mean? That's what makes me want to take the next bitch car.
What now? I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Are you speaking English?
Her mother has tried everything, including therapy, to get her daughter back on the straight and narrow. Prior to the Dr. Phil show, she was considering having her handed over to the authorities if the good old doctor couldn't talk some sense into the young girl. But he didn't have her back as much as he had mine when I sat down on her show. Let's take a look.
Did you threaten to kill us? Did you say something mean?
Here are 2 quotes that Michael has said, and he certainly hasn't made any inappropriate threats against y'all.
Now, if you want to see a full clip to that video, I'll leave a link down below on where you can find it. When producers went to visit Barbara and Danielle, the 13-year-old stole a production vehicle and crashed into her grandmother's car. While on the show in Los Angeles, she uttered these now infamous words.
Catch me outside, how about that?
On the show, Big Phil, he diagnosed the girl as putting up a wall to deal with her father abandoning the family and her mother battling cancer not once but twice. He also gave her the option of going to a ranch for therapy treatment. Now, I'm not sure if she went, but based on her recent Instagram videos, I think it's safe to say she did not.
First of all, I don't even record the fights I get into. Only reason that one was recorded because I was on Xanax. Like, who am I to have to prove that I could beat somebody's ass?
It was way back on September 15, 2016 that the Dr. Phil show uploaded this clip, but it took some time for the video to find its audience. It was in October that the clip was uploaded to Meme Crunch, but it would take until 2017 for it to find a following on Facebook as a meme. Some of my faves include listens to 21 Savage once, Catch Me Outside. Roses are red, your eyes gonna be black if you cash me outside. How about that? And I can cash you out over here, cash me outside. How about that? Danielle was becoming extremely popular online with her Instagram account hitting close to 1 million followers. There were fake accounts, imposters. The girl had become a viral star. Then the unexpected happened. It was reported that she had committed suicide.
Catch Me Outside girl found dead for a parent, you know what I'm saying, suicide after months of being bullied from social media and peers at school.
That was a clip from the channel Hood News in Elmira. Really great news source, you should probably subscribe. What they were saying went like this. After months of bullying from social media and peers at school, Danielle was found dead in her room on January 23rd. A fight with a fellow student leaked online of Danielle being dragged out of a car and repeatedly struck in the head. Just days after, Danielle was found unresponsive by her mother in her bedroom. Now that whole story is bogus, but Danielle did find a girl willing to cash her outside. And I pulled her right by her hair. It's pretty graphic.
Oh my God!
Put your phone down.
But Danielle, she licked her wounds, and then she had a message for all her haters.
Everybody get their ass beat once. I don't give a fuck. Talk about it all you want. Keep saying, but you got dragged.
With the online meme now gaining more and more attention, countless YouTube channels have taken to recreate the catchphrase in their own creative ways. Let's roll some of the best, shall we?
Two trailer park girls go
Catch me outside. Catch me outside. Catch me outside.
Why are you upset with me?
Come to me now.
Bitch,
You want to take me outside because I think they can bring cameras
What the
outside.
f are you talking about, bitch?
I've never injected anything other than getting B12 shots. Okay.
Lindsay Lohan was born in New York City on July 2nd, 1986. Lohan was a child actress and model before she rose to fame as an accomplished actress in 2004's Mean Girls. From there, she was a bona fide star. She was banking $7 million per film. Her next project was another Disney film, this time Herbie Fully Loaded, but at the same time her family life would fall apart. Her parents soon divorced, and all of a sudden Lindsay was partying a little too hard. She would show up on set hungover, directors would be getting pissed off, and at one point she had a cocaine overdose and her father was notified. The father went on to say that he rushed to get to the airport to help his daughter out, but then got arrested for a DUI and was sentenced to a year in prison. Soon after this time, Lindsay was hospitalized. They claimed that she was suffering from exhaustion and dehydration. Now, if you really party like crazy, the alcohol, it really dehydrates you, and yeah, you'd be tired, so maybe that makes sense. But the real reason with the girl was party machine. In 2007, Lindsay would check herself into rehab for the first time. That same year, she crashed her Mercedes-Benz into a tree in Beverly Hills, and later got a DUI when a woman called the cops stating that Lindsay was chasing her like a mad woman. Both times, Lindsay was caught with cocaine in her possession.
I tried cocaine with alcohol.
She now had a rap sheet and she had to go back to rehab. She got lucky with the police this time and only spent 84 hours in prison, but we're just getting started. Around this time, she started dating DJ Samantha Ronson, and the two of them would light up LA's nightlife. Simultaneously, Lindsay tried to relaunch her career professionally, appearing in an episode of Ugly Betty, as well as a straight-to-DVD feature film known as Labor Pains. But partying seemed to be her priority. She missed a court hearing while she was at the Cannes Film Festival, so she was taken back into custody. Soon after, she got into trouble again when she stole a necklace from a high-end shop. From there, she would be in and out of courtrooms, rehab facilities, house arrest, and red carpet parties. It's hard to keep track of what the hell her game plan was. Finally, someone was stepping in to help her out, and it came in the form of Oprah Winfrey, who decided they would do an 8-part docu-series called Lindsay.
Are you now ready to heal whatever it is that's kept you from being who you need to be?
It aired through March and April of 2014 on Oprah Winfrey's cable network. Throughout the show, Oprah would mentor the young starlet to try and get her back to A-list status. But Lindsay seemed to gravitate back to her old ways. Eventually, Oprah decided, yeah, I'm not gonna renew this series. And this announcement was made while Lindsay was at Coachella partying. Then there was the sex list. In Touch magazine got their hands on this after a waiter sold it to the highest bidder. Lindsay allegedly got it on with Justin Timberlake, Adam Levine, James Franco, Heath Ledger, Zac Efron, Colin Farrell, even Joaquin Phoenix.